So I create another video for one of the points on the part 3 of the keynote, and that's support staff as they begin using UDL as the lens in the practice. It's a very anecdotal section of the keynote, so I wanted to, where I draw a lot from my own experience and my own lived experience as a leader and director of an accessibility services. So there's various things I wanted to mention. I think, first of all, it's important as leaders of these units that we recognize the diversity of experience and trainings that we have. We have all sorts of staffs. We have people who are specialized in digitalization of material. We have receptionists. We have people who are case advisors. We have people who are in leadership roles. I think we're unique often in universities in the really diverse profiles we have. So I think it's good, first of all, to accept that we don't have the same understanding of UDL, that we have to standardize this understanding of UDL across our units and not take anything for granted. And this may be quite complex because it does mean that you're going to be creating internal UDL training for your receptionist, for your exam resource person, for your case advisors, for your office coordinators. Because if you don't, students are going to, and service users are going to have the distinct impression that you're still stuck in a medical model perspective, and they will see in the interaction that they have with the staff at different levels that the message hasn't dribbled right through. So I think the important thing for leaders, first of all, is to take the time to acknowledge this diversity of background and profiles, to then conceive and design training that's appropriate for all of these staff, and then to structure and take the time to actually do this training and to do this thoroughly and to take as long as it needs. It's a large task. We did it when I was running an office, and it took about a year to get this thoroughly. And obviously, you also have turnover, so you have to think about onboarding, and that training has to be available in a way that can be duplicated and run again, because people who've had the training will leave, new people will arrive. But if you want to keep that culture within a unit, you have to actually systematize the way you actually are doing this and have something sustainable that can be offered again and again and again as many times as it needs to happen. You also need to translate, obviously, UDL principles into something that is free of jargon, that's relevant to a layperson. You have people in your offices that are not specialists. They may be working specifically on exams, on digitalization material, on specific tools. They need to be able to understand it, make it their own, gain ownership over this. So designing, again, this training in a way that is accessible to anyone is going to be extremely important. Then you have to allow people time, I think, to dribble it down to their own practice. People, again, have very different jobs within a disability services unit. Often there's a tendency to rush, especially in the current circumstances where things are changing so fast and the landscape is pressing us to move fast. We have a reflex to rush. I think my advice would be against rushing. I'm personally someone who's very objective based, so I've had the experience of trying to move very fast. I think it doesn't work. I think you have to give people time to really get ownership over UDL principles, to dribble them down to their own area, niche of work, to examine themselves. What is it that they need to change to align themselves with UDL principle or social model principles, and then to come up with the solutions. I have an anecdote to offer there. We had an exam coordinator, who we did this with and gave him plenty of time to think through how this, affected him, how his job wasn't aligned with UDL principles but needed to be aligned with UDL principles, and gave him almost a year to think through and to come up with solutions. And then eventually he is the one that came up with solutions that we were able to present in conferences, where he really redesigned the way we used the database. And instead of actually asking students to jump through hoops and do specific processes to be registered for exams, he sort of, at the end of this reflection, decided that really the job was his, and it was about designing things differently. And then he created a bridge between our database and the exam services database. And then basically, without having to ask students to register, set up a process where every student who might need a room for exams had it available. If they choose not to, there was still a room for them in the main gym. they could actually choose up to the last minute where they were going because the place was secured. It also made his life a lot easier because instead of waiting for forms to come in, correcting mistakes on forms, double checking that everything was actually in order, something that would take months, he suddenly had a data solution that was enabling him to do this right from the beginning of the semester and to know exactly how many seats he needed and where and with the right course numbers. And that satisfaction only came because we allowed him the time to really run through this sort of alignment or misalignment at first, and then towards an alignment between his job prospects, his job definition and profile, and UDL, and then to come up with the solutions himself. Also accept, I think, that as we shift from a model which is very medical model, very deficit based, which relies heavily on people's one-on-one interactions and assistant and help, a notion that we've discussed a lot in this keynote. As we move away from that to the notion of social model, so a notion of UDL, of a learning experience that's designed for inclusion, and that allows students to be autonomous. So as we move towards that, and students have less and less need to come in and interact one-on-one with your staff, you may have staff who decide to leave. You're going to find that certain people have joined accessibility services, disability services, because they want to help. They're helpers, fundamental helpers. That's really, they see that as their vocation. And as we move away towards something radically different, it won't suit everyone. And I think as a leader, you've got to realize that there will be a percentage of departures, because for some people, they've really seen this job as being frontline, day in, day out, assisting people who are in a difficult situation, and they find it less motivating and not aligned with their own personality when you actually move towards a conception of disability services as being something which is more focused on the environment, more focused on faculty, less focused on frontline with students. And I think that's fine. I think we're in a process of evolution. In any process of change, you will have certain employees who will say that doesn't suit them, and they have philosophical opposition to the direction where your unit is going, and that's something to be obviously mitigated if we can, but to accept as well that it won't please everyone, and this phenomenon that does happen as units are starting to shift their vocation and their mission.